So it's been a quick minute. I decided to do the spur of the moment recap of the weekend fights. The card was Shakur Stevenson versus William Zepeda. This has been a fight that's been hyped up for many years. The showdown between Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda. And on July 12th, which was this Saturday past there, Shakur faced up against William Zepeda. And the Ring Magazine did a great job. All the fights were action-packed fights. I didn't agree with all the decisions, but all the fights on that night were action-packed fights, and they were good. It was solid stuff, man. Solid stuff, solid action. So we'll talk about it. I'm going to talk about it today. First of all, here was the card. In Louis Armstrong Stadium, Queens, New York, USA, on the Zone, the New York State Athletic Commission presiding, Oscar De La Hoya being the promoter. We had the card, Shakur Stevenson versus William Zepeda. The fight before that was Subriel Matias versus Alberto Puello. Alberto Puello was the, if I'm not mistaken, he was the IBF, the WBC, sorry, super lightweight champion. And then we also had Hamzah Sheeraz versus Edgar Berlanga. We had David Morell versus Imam Khataev. And all of these fights were great fights. I'm not going to lie to you. Every single one except for the Edgar Berlanga fight was a close fight. And I didn't exactly agree with the judge's decision for 2 out of the 4 fights. I didn't agree with it. So let's get into these fights. We'll start off with, I'll start off with David Morell. I'll start at the bottom of the card and I'll go up. David Morell versus Imam Khataev. Now, that fight was very interesting, okay? Because, is this it? Yeah. Because Khataev dropped David Morell in the second round, okay? He dropped him. And Morell changed up his game, started boxing on the back foot, and Imam Khataev, he kept on bringing the heat, man. Dude was strong, could take a punch, and not only could he take a punch, but he also had decent defense, and he was pushing the action throughout the fight. The zone commentary favored him to have won the fight against David Morell. Now, I have to say, David Morell, when his corner pushed him to take up the action, David Morell took up the action. And this happened, I think David Morell started taking it up in round 10, 11, and 12. The championship rounds, he really turned it up. And he hurt Imam Khataev in the 12th round. And it looked like he was trying to put him away, and then Imam would come back. Now, having said all of that, I do believe this was a close fight. It was a close fight because I think David Morell outboxed Imam Khataev during the middle to late rounds, okay? He was boxing him more than anything else. Don't get me wrong, Khataev was landing some good shots. Morell also was landing some good shots. But for the most part, Morell changed up his game and started boxing him. Now, a lot of people think that Khataev was robbed because this was a close fight, and then Khataev had the knockdown. So most thought that Khataev should get the decision. I think the urgency that David Morell showed in the championship rounds from 10 to 12 sort of turned that around. Even though Khataev could eat a lot of David Morell's punches, and David Morell was very accurate with his punches, by the way. In the 12th round, David Morell buckled him. He hurt him. And while Khataev was able to eat those punches, Morell was really pushing for a knockout in the 12th. He had intensified. The 11th round, he had taken it up, and in the 12th round, he really took it up. And I think that must have been the lasting impression on the judges that scored those. Obviously, they scored those last 3 rounds for David Morell, for sure. I think he took all the last 3. And I think that evened up things and edged it to David Morell. I would not have been disappointed if they had gotten a draw, because I thought while Khataev did knock down David Morell early and was really looking good early, I thought David Morell sort of kicked in gears in the latter. Sorry, this was a 10-rounder. So I think 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, I think David Morell kicked in his experience and really started turning it up in 8, 9, and 10. I think Morell was doing well in 6 and 7. He was more boxing. 5, 6, 7. He was more boxing. And I think he really turned it up in rounds 8 to 10. It wasn't a 12 round. It was a 10-rounder. Sorry about that. And so, do I think it could have been edged to Morell? I like the commentators think that that Khataev did enough to win, because it was a close fight, and David Morell kind of evened it up by, taking that late surge, 8, 9, 10. But I think that Khataev did enough to get a draw at least, because that 2 points that he got for the knockdown, that makes a big difference in a fight. And it did change David Morell's way of fighting for a minute, So that's what I got for you guys. Now, he didn't beat down David Morell. David Morell's kind of boxing him more than anything else. In the trades, Khataev looked like he was getting the better of the trades, but at least initially. But later on, David Morell turned the tide, and he really went hard at him in the last 2 rounds. It wasn't a championship fight. Sorry, my bad. So there's nothing like championship rounds. It was a good fight. I thought it should have been scored a draw. And that's why I kind of disagree to some degree with the judge's decision to give David Morell the win over that. But it was still a good fight. And these 2 young fighters will go on to make a name for themselves. So they can just keep on keeping that level of performance that they have. So as you can see here, this fight was light heavyweight fight, and it was a 10-rounder. And Khataev dropped Morell in round 5. I thought he dropped him in round 2. My bad. He dropped him in round 5. I'm mixing up things. All right. The other fight I want to talk to you guys about is Edgar Berlanga versus Hamzah Sheeraz, which, it was an upset win. Hamzah Sheeraz knocking out Edgar Berlanga, I believe, in the 5th round, and pretty much ending the fight. Now, Edgar Berlanga got a lot of heart because he got dropped hard twice. He banged his hands together and he got back up on his feet. But you could see he was visibly shaken. And then in the early seconds of the 5th round, Hamzah Sheeraz just put him away. The referee stopped the fight. For some people, this is a shock, upset, but because nobody expected Edgar Berlanga to get knocked out. Hamzah Sheeraz, though, is huge. He just moved up in the weight class, but he's a huge guy, undefeated. And at super middleweight, he's huge for a super middleweight. And he used his size and his reach to his advantage. And the fight was very tactical until I think Edgar Berlanga was trading with him, and Sheeraz was able to just catch him with a 4-punch combination. And after that, Edgar Berlanga just never recovered. Never recovered. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. Right, I think this is the second knockdown. That's the second knockdown. Yeah. So that was huge. Hamzah Sheeraz is from one of the Middle Eastern countries. So he did the prince proud, you know what I mean? yeah, so that was that fight. Now we have one more fight to talk about here. Let's see, or two. I think it's two more fights. So he took the fight into his hands and he stopped Edgar Berlanga. Nobody expected that to happen. I didn't expect it to happen, but he got that knockout, bro. He got him out of there. Now, the next fight that we want to talk about is Subriel Matias versus Alberto Puello. And I just want to say straight off the bat, Alberto Puello is an excellent, excellent fighter. And I honestly believe that Subriel Matias was gifted that decision. I think he was gifted that decision. Well, I can't straight up say it's a robbery because it was a close fight. Alberto Puello outmaneuvered, outmanipulated, and just clearly in the latter rounds of this championship fight, he literally was controlling the action. Like Subriel Matias couldn't catch him with nothing, you know? And Subriel Matias right now is WBC World Super Lightweight Champion. Alberto Puello, a Dominican Republic boxer. His opportunity to show what kind of class boxer he is officially on the records was taken from him. And you know, Subriel Matias has all the money behind him and stuff, but that is just not right what happened. Now, Alberto Puello was a good sportsman. You know, he clapped the result, but really and truly, Alberto Puello outboxed Subriel Matias, and he's a southpaw as well. And he completely outboxed this dude. And it's really sad to see. It's really sad to see a guy do what Puello did. He clearly separated himself from Subriel Matias and not get the accolades that he deserved. And so the DAZN team, they even said that, they thought Alberto Puello was winning against Subriel Matias. And I saw the fight myself, and I thought Alberto pulled it off. It was a close-ish fight early on. It was competitive. Matias always keep on coming. Puello just kept on tagging him up, and it just got more and more obvious as Matias started to tie it down that Puello was in control of this fight. And Puello was doing whatever he wanted to do, pretty much. And yes, Puello was continuously on the back foot. Matias was continuously on the front foot. But, mostly Matias was just eating punches. You can't be just eating punches the whole fight. You're not really landing anything significant. And you get the fight for that. And I just think it was just not right. Was the fight close? Yes, it was a close fight. It was a close fight in the sense of this. Matias was landing some shots. Puello could take a shot and stuff. It wasn't like Puello was only not getting hit. But most of the time, the stuff that Puello was hitting Matias with was much more effective. So I wouldn't consider Matias the most effective, especially later on in the fight. I wouldn't consider Matias the most effective fighter in the ring there. Now, some people say, well, Puello was using his head and he was clinching. No, Puello was clinching when appropriate. He was pivoting when it was appropriate. He's a southpaw, and the clash of heads, southpaw orthodox, that will happen. But ultimately, in the end, you cannot be giving a guy who's eating up most of the punches. The other guy's pummeling him with punches and beating him up. And you're going to give that guy the fight because, he's known as a machine. He can walk through punches. Yeah, he's delivering one or two punches, but not the same as the other guy. And that was clean. And so that's why you can say this guy's aggressive and he's pushing the action. You could say that. But you have to watch it also the person who's the ring general. And Puello was the ring general in that fight. And it's really sad because, okay, Puello's not no superstar. He's not no big name in boxing. You know what I mean? Matias has all the hype behind him. But to win this way, to be a punching bag, and that's how you win a fight, that don't show good, man. It don't show good. You know what I mean? And this is not the same as David Morell versus Imam Khataev. Imam Khataev was landing body shots and stuff on David Morell. He dropped David Morell, and the fight was close. Even though Morell was landing some really choice shots on Khataev, he would recover and he would come back and he would trade his own shots back at David Morell, So while I do get that David Morell could have won this fight, even though he got dropped, I cannot see how Subriel Matias won that fight against Alberto Puello. He did absolutely nothing significant to Alberto Puello. Never hurt him at any point in time. Alberto Puello was outmaneuvering most of the fight, even though it wasn't as obvious in the beginning. I just don't get it. And that's why the scorecards were close, right? It was 115, 113 in two scorecards and a draw on another scorecard, okay? So it was a close fight, but still, nonetheless, I don't understand. If this was Devin, let's say it was Devin Haney versus Subriel Matias and put on that kind of performance, they'd have given that fight to Devin Haney. If Shakur Stevenson was at 140 and he did that kind of performance against Subriel Matias, they'd give it to Shakur Stevenson, right? I don't like what they did to Alberto Puello. Okay, this was the opportunity for this guy to show how good a boxer he was, having beaten just about everybody they put in front of him, and so I find it tasteless. That's what I'm saying. And this fight and the David Morell fight, I thought the judging there was unfair to the people who actually put out effort. Imam Khataev, you say it's a close fight, then he got the knockdown. He should have gotten the win, or at least a draw. And with Alberto Puello versus Subriel Matias, Alberto Puello was the ringmaster. He was the guy that was dictating how this fight was going, what was happening in the fight. It didn't seem apparent in the beginning, but as Subriel Matias particularly started to slow down later on, Alberto Puello took over the fight. Right? Matias was throwing a lot of activity, a lot of volume, and he punched himself out. And Puello, that's where he was able to separate himself, and everybody was able to see who the champ was in this thing and who needed to get. And I'm surprised. Puello thought he won. He raised his hands at the end of the fight and everything. He thought he'd done enough to win. And I don't like those kinds of things. You know, that's the problem with boxing a lot of times. The judges need to do their fucking job and get the thing right. They're not doing their job. They're doing shit a lot of times. And this is what hurts the sport. You get some, but I have no complaints about the fights. All the fights on the 12th were good action-packed fights. Even Shakur Stevenson gave us a tremendous effort on his part and a really beautiful performance against William Zepeda. Actually, let me rephrase that because I'm endowing a little too much to Shakur Stevenson. I'll say this. Shakur Stevenson gave us a much better performance against Zepeda than he did, say, against, what's the guy's name? Where he was moving a lot. I forgot his name right now. Actually, I can find out his name. Hold on a second. Edwin De Los Santos. So his fight against Edwin De Los Santos was definitely not this fight that we got with William Zepeda, right? So Shakur, he did very well in this fight with William Zepeda. He did very well in this fight with William Zepeda. However, I'll be honest with you. Shakur kept on backing his own damn self into the ropes. And I thought to myself, why are you doing that? Why? Your trainer since round 3 was telling you, just pivot out. As you back up, pivot out. And he just backed himself. He backs it. Shakur was backing himself up in the ropes. I look at Shakur, how he would walk Zepeda out from the ropes. He would use his body, angle himself. Zepeda was bumping Shakur with his shoulder. He was pushing his shoulder to push him back. Whereas Shakur would get under Zepeda and push Zepeda back, right? With his 2-guard up. And there was a lot of infighting in this fight. And initially, in the beginning, Shakur was really, really letting Zepeda back him up to the ropes and get a couple shots in on him. Even though Shakur's defense is quite tight. So no matter what Zepeda threw, Shakur's not really getting hit with anything significant. Nonetheless, you had Zepeda almost the entirety of the fight out-throwing you. And especially against the ropes, out-throwing you against the ropes for a significant portion of the fight, you only adjusted, I think, in round 8, somewhere there. You started fighting in the center of the ring and taking control of the fight, from round 8 all the way up to round 12. But the problem is, you let this guy back you up into the ropes. You never pivoted out of the ropes, and he could have done it. And it doesn't look like you're doing a toe-to-toe when you do that. Every time you back up, this guy continues. I can't remember when. I think Shakur hurt Zepeda in the 10th round, I think it was. And Zepeda started backing up because Shakur had hurt him. Shakur hurt him a couple of times, but he wouldn't pursue backing him up and actually going after him. And that was very frustrating. Now, yes, Shakur stood there and traded mostly with Zepeda, whether it was off the ropes in the center of the ring. He could have done a lot more, I think. But, his tendency is to fight off the back foot. So he would constantly back himself up into the ropes and then move along the ropes until Zepeda would cut him off and then start throwing a host of the barrages, and he just have to shell up and dodge and stuff. But the thing about it is he would, from that corner, after Zepeda emptied his load, Shakur would now push Zepeda back to the center of the ring and start doing this thing all over again, okay? Shakur was definitely the guy with the cleaner, sharper shots, all right? But here's my question. Based on how these judges were judging the night, let's say Shakur was not Shakur. Let's say he was, Gustavo Puello. Not Gustavo Puello. What's his name? Alberto's Puello, right? Let's say Shakur was Alberto Puello, and he was doing all that stuff he did. You think he'd have gotten the decision against William Zepeda? See what I'm saying? And that's the inconsistency of boxing. It's the inconsistency of the judging. Once Shakur started, Zepeda was starting to slow down, and Shakur started to find his rhythm. He started blasting Zepeda a lot. And he would stay in the center of the ring, blast him. He'd hold his ground. He'd not necessarily push Zepeda back, but he would use his counters, and he would use his quick hand speed, 4-punch combinations. And you could see Shakur was trying to get his rhythm together. He was missing a lot of shots early on, but later on it started to click together. And he really started to wail on Zepeda. And then he started doing whatever he wanted. And in the 12th round, he was doing whatever he wanted. And the crowd wanted to boo at a certain point when he started to move around a little bit in the 11th. But by the 12th, he was, he did his thing. Now, was it anything exceptional? Was it anything, terrific or flashy or, really cool? Did he drop Zepeda? No, it wasn't that. It was efficient. He had an efficient performance. He didn't really try to match Zepeda's activity. He just was more clinical and accurate with his shots. Was I impressed by his performance? Y'all gonna say I'm a Shakur Stevenson hater, but no, I think he can do much better than that. Now Zepeda was bumping him with the shoulder to push him back, but Shakur his defense was good enough that I don't know why he didn't do this, but he kept going straight back and Shakur is known for going straight back. And this is the problem with Shakur. You have to cut angles when you're moving backwards. The reason why Shakur got backed his own damn self into the ropes was because he goes straight back. And that is a problem. That is a flaw that Shakur doesn't realize he has. You should be able to pivot off to the side, or you should be pivoting in small pivots so you can turn your opponent where you want them to go. And he doesn't do that, so that he can circle back out into the center of the ring. He does not pivot off an angle. And Shakur needs to look at Lomachenko and how he moves backwards. He moves in an angle. He's circling out. And Shakur does not circle out. And that's a flaw. And that's the flaw I see over and over and over in his game. And that is something that Gervonta Tank Davis will take advantage of. Gervonta Tank Davis is no William Zepeda. He's much more accurate, much sharper, much more cat-like. And if Shakur thinks that he can just outbox, Gervonta or try to bang with him like he tried to bang with Zepeda, he gonna feel a certain kind of way, you know what I mean? Because Tank might just, might sever his senses from him. I think that, I listened to Shakur after this fight and talking about, I could bang, I could scrap, Yeah, still need Shakur needs to understand. You can't just be going straight back on guys. You're gonna get knocked out. James Toney got dropped by Roy Jones Jr. going straight back, leaning and going straight back. You don't go straight back in boxing, and it's something I see Shakur doing over and over and over again. His fundamental flaw in his game is going straight back. And that's why Zepeda was able to back him up into the ropes, because he just keeps going straight back. And it's not Zepeda doing that, it's him. He takes, every time Zepeda takes a step forward, he takes two shuffles back, and it's straight. You know? That's the problem with Shakur Stevenson. And his fundamental flaw is going to cost him if he does not correct it. Okay? Because it is a flaw in his game. Yeah, but having said that, he gave a nice, he allowed for a nonstop action fight. And he himself was really, picking and choosing his shots to pick off Zepeda with. And, he had some beautiful combinations in there. He should have gone to the body a lot more. He didn't. He was more head hunting. So these are the other things I'm seeing. And again, I'm not saying that Shakur didn't fight more or less toe-to-toe with Zepeda. Right? He was doing that. No doubt about it. Sometimes he even abandoned his jab, being in close, and was, doing his thing. But again, he's not as impressive. William Zepeda versus, say, a Floyd Mayweather that they like to compare Shakur to. He's not Floyd Mayweather, but whatever. Or a Terrence Crawford, Zepeda would not be there, because, or even a Keyshawn Davis, they would have chopped this guy up and they'd have knocked this guy out. Okay, and I know Shakur is not a fighter like that. He's not a dynamic fighter. Floyd Mayweather Jr., Pretty Boy Floyd, would have destroyed Zepeda. He would have, ripped him to shreds. The attitude, the mentality is different. And yes, Shakur has bad hands, but that doesn't mean because you got bad hands, that you can't show the difference in ferocity. Zepeda is supposed to be, the most ferocious guy out there. So you have to show that you're more intense than he is. That's the thing that Shakur, he's good. Don't get me wrong. And he's doing what is necessary. Shakur's, to me, more like Andre Ward than he's like Floyd Mayweather, in the sense that he's more efficient. He don't look that great. I'll be honest with you. He do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. He's kind of like a robot. He does the same thing over and over. Floyd's more creative. Roy Jones Jr. was extremely creative. But Shakur's more clinical, is the word I'm looking for. And the thing with Zepeda was he kept coming. At no time in the fight did Zepeda stop coming. But Shakur really had pinpoint accuracy in what he was doing. And he was able to stave off, or shall I say, stop Zepeda from coming at certain points in time, and actually have him retreat a little bit. Shakur is behaving like, he's the best thing since sliced bread. And you're supposed to be like that as a fighter. You're supposed to have an ego like that. But I would say that, yeah, you traded with Zepeda. Yeah. And you were able to beat an undefeated fighter who was, doing this thing. But ultimately, in the end, I feel like Shakur Stevenson, and by the way, this was a unanimous decision win. I think they had it 118 to 110. I think 119 to 109. So two were 118 to 110, and one was 119 to 109. So in other words, Zepeda didn't even win a single round. I totally disagree with the judges on that. I don't think it was that wide. Jose Zepeda either won rounds 1, 2, or 3. He won some rounds. And so I don't believe it was a shutout at all. Another reason why, I don't really like boxing, because Shakur has a reputation for being a defensive fighter. We understand that. But it doesn't mean he won every single round of the fight. I just don't see that. I didn't see that. And so, especially when Zepeda got him in the corner and was wailing, yeah, okay, he wasn't landing much of anything, but he was wailing on him. He had him in the corner. You have to, especially if Shakur ain't done nothing significant in that whole entire round, you got to get that round to Zepeda. You can't give it to Shakur. So the scorecards were ridiculous and were much wider than they're supposed to be. That fight was a lot closer than people made it to be. It was competitive, but it was also a lot closer. Yes, Shakur pulled away in the later rounds. He definitively was in control of the fight in the later rounds. Nobody's saying no. I think 3 or 4 rounds were definitively his rounds. But a lot of the rest of the fight was kind of swing rounds because Zepeda was very, very active. He may not be as accurate as Shakur, but he was very, very active. And you have to look at the fighter that's pushing the action. And Zepeda was pushing the action. Shakur was landing 1 or 2 shots in certain rounds, but he wasn't really doing much of anything, just mostly playing defense, in which case you have to get the round to Zepeda. And so that's why I didn't understand how they could even get that thing. It was a closer fight than people make it out to be. I thought Shakur pulled away in the last 2 rounds. The championship round, I think in the last 2 rounds he's defending his championship belt, I think he pulled away. But to say that, so it could be more of an 8-4, 7-5 fight. Okay, that's what I think it is. I don't think it's they're making it out to be like a 9-3 or a 10-2 fight. I don't see it as a 9-3, 10-2 fight. I don't understand what the judges were looking at. And these are the kinds of problems we have with these fights. The judges go in with their either unconscious biases, oh yeah, this guy's a defensive fighter matching up with an offensive guy. And they think that, a lot of certain shots that Shakur supposedly landed on Zepeda were rolled or Zepeda caught them. So you can't just, there's a lot of things in this fight that I saw. Yes, I think the right guy won. But the way how people sort of exaggerate everything with Shakur is my problem. They're either saying he's a real villain, he's not this, and he's blah, 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 or he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Look at him, he can fight, he has dog in him, blah, 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 blah. And I don't like those superlatives. It's stupid. Like, the guy did well. He did better. He fought. He was, even if the other guy was pushing him back most of the fight, he was fighting the guy. He was in front of the guy, he was fighting him. And then again, you have to credit Zepeda for making it into what kind of fight it was. Zepeda does cut off the ring, and that was a very important thing. When Shakur's grandfather was asking him to pivot out the way, Zepeda was cutting off the ring. He would not be deterred. Nonetheless, I just think that Zepeda should have run into something, and I think Shakur didn't. Let's say this is Tank versus Zepeda. I'm sure Zepeda gets knocked out, right? Not only that, he gets caught with a shot. Zepeda would have walked into something. And Shakur once or twice countered Zepeda and gave him something to think about, But I feel like, and I know at that level it's difficult to deal with that. But I'm thinking, if this is Tank Davis going to that body long time. Tank has a body attack that he mixes into his game. Why he's able to knock out fighters is because he starts investing in the body very early. And like the game plan that Shakur has is more of a defensive game plan than an offensive game plan or a balance. He's not looking to wear down Zepeda's body. Instead, he's going to Zepeda's head all the time, and he's striking the head instead of the body. And you could say, well, Zepeda's protecting his body pretty well. Yeah, okay. But you still have to go to the body. You see, Zepeda was landing some nice jabs to the body and Shakur's body, stealing moments to go to the body. And don't get me wrong, when Shakur landed body shots, they were vicious body shots. But my point being, there's things to improve in Shakur's game, and I feel like he's still squandering certain things, and he's not systematic. Floyd Mayweather or Tank Davis, they're more systematic in how they break down fighters because they know they have to go to the body and they know how to break them down. Zepeda got probably, like most Mexicans, has a hard head. So you're not trying to just head target practice. And I think that even on the scorecards in this fight, I think a lot of fighters need to invest in the body. You know, Matias goes to the body, but Puello just kind of denied him the kind of opportunity he really was looking for. You know what I mean? David Morell was headhunting as well. He wasn't going to the body as much, and so you know, these fighters. I know going to the body is a very, you have to know how to do it, to position your body, to get yourself in position to do that. But still, um, you know, inside fighting is a very important thing. And Shakur showed he could inside fight a little bit, so that was also good. In his fight with Zepeda, William Zepeda. So you know, I just put this out there for you boxing fans out there that this weekend was a good weekend of fights. You know, the fights themselves lived up to what we were expecting of them. Um, I think that though the judging once again kind of lets us down. You know, I think that Puello should have won his fight, and I think that Khataev should have at least gotten a draw out of it because he knocked down uh, he knocked down David Morell. So that's my discussion on the weekend fights. You guys can leave your comments in the comment section below. I see all of you guys that came through. Smash the like button if you like what you're hearing. You guys have a